Hello and a warm good day to all my viewers and my esteemed listeners out there. Welcome back to Human Rights Heralds, and today on our episode 5 of the Human Rights series, we shall be dwelling on the topic Human Rights Intervention, what every citizen must know. Every day, citizens face situations where their fundamental rights are threatened. Yes, I'll have to say that again. Every day, I will add every minute of the day, even as I speak to you. Citizens across the country, scores of them, face situations where their fundamental rights are threatened. Sometimes by ignorance, sometimes by abuse of power. But what many do not know is that there are moments when the law requires an immediate human rights intervention. In this episode of Human Rights Heralds, we break down what intervention means, when it applies, and how every citizen can use it to protect themselves and others. Welcome to a quarter hour with the Human Rights Wizard. And I am still your usual anchor, Ogochukwu Onoha, the Human Rights Wizard. Let us start by talking about the meaning of human rights intervention. Of course, to intervene means to interfere, to come between parties, to arrive on time in order to arrest a situation which is threatening to get out of hand. That is what it means to intervene. In this case, we are talking about intervening either to prevent a human rights abuse or to arrest the situation and stop further abuse if the abuse is already going on. Our next question is, who are the people who usually abuse others? Let me give you an example of what you must do when there is abuse and the category of people that are likely to violate your fundamental rights. One, perhaps the most important, are the security agents who are authorized by law to prevent crimes, to detect crimes, and to arrest and prosecute those who are suspected of having committed crimes or who are reasonably believed to be about to commit crimes. The first thing that you must do as a citizen who has some fundamental rights, not only to enjoy, but also to protect and defend, is to be bold. And one way of becoming bold and get yourself immune to intimidation is to have sufficient knowledge of the law, which is what this channel is poised to help you to do. Imagine a Nigerian military officer assaulting you, that is, beating you up, or assaulting you in some other ways. What should you do? What you should do is, first of all, if you meet a law enforcement agent, do not miss to take the name on the breastplate of the officer. Nowadays, that name is usually woven or stitched on the uniform, the breast part of the uniform of the police officer, army officer, or some other members of the law enforcement agent community. Do not miss to take the name. You can't fight the military officer or the police officer, not because it's against the law, Section 33 of the Constitution of the Federation of Nigeria is on the right to life. Subsection 1 of that section is on self-defense. So a member of the army begins to assault you, a member of the police begins to assault you, you could possibly get killed. The law permits you, irrespective of the fact that the officer is in uniform, the law empowers you to fight back. Members of the law enforcement agents, as a matter of fact, the police and the army are not authorized by any law to beat anybody up or to brutalize anybody. It is only the law court that is empowered to spell out punishments, to mete out punishments after due process. When I mean due process, after an accused person has been tried and found guilty of the offense for which he or she had been accused. That is when the presiding judge or magistrate will read out the law and pronounce some punishment on the person. Outside that, no one else is authorized to punish. The court also specifies whose duty it is to administer the punishment. So first, you need to be bold. If you face such an assault in the hands of a member of the military, what you should do is walk into the nearest military barrack and ask for the office of the military police. The military police is a section of the Nigerian army that plays the role of the police within the military. They arrest fellow military officers who offend the law. Report such an army officer having taken his name or her name at the office of the military police. Now I understand that this might be difficult for some citizens because the training is not there, which was why I talked about boldness in the first place. If you cannot do this, then you can at least approach a human rights organization. It's a part of the reason why we are here. If you call my number and say this is the situation, I can refer you to one of the human rights organizations that this channel is affiliated to, so that they will render the needful service to you. They will help you bring such military officer to trial. In addition, you need to have the phone numbers of the PPRO, Police Public Relations Officer, of all the states in Nigeria. I could publish the number here, but I don't want to give the impression that I am begging you to have the numbers. No, because human rights intervention and everything about human rights have to come from within. It has to be a desire, someone's interest to do so. So if you have interest in joining us to fight crime in the country and protect human rights, just go to Google. That effort alone implies that you have the interest. Go to Google and type phone contacts or contact phone numbers of police PPROs across Nigeria, and you have it all. If you have the PPRO's phone number in the state where you live, and you notice a police officer brutalizing or beating up a citizen in the street, like many of us have witnessed, do not drag issues with the police. But you can go close and tell the police that he is doing the wrong thing, that he is breaking the law. The officer will not take it kindly, but tell the officer you will call the PPRO and report him. By the time you do so, you've already seen the name on his breastplate. Address him by that name. Tell him, this is your name, Patrick Eze. I will call the PPRO and tell him what you have done in this street. That alone is enough to deter many police officers from assaulting members of the civilian population. Now, I'll give you a short anecdote. I was in a taxi in an Enugu street one day, and then there was a sudden hold-up. The hold-up was caused because the tricycle, the so-called keke, in front of our own driver had stopped. We didn't know, really, we didn't follow it up from the beginning. We didn't realize what was happening on time. But there were two police officers standing outside by the roadside. They were not traffic police, and they were not on duty. I don't know what they came to do there. But then we saw the driver of the keke step out. He alighted from his car and then started running down the street. Then it was when he came back. At first I thought possibly there was something he forgot and he wanted to collect it. It was when he came back and the police officer asked him to get back and drive on, that he would deal with him the next time he tried that. Of course, we didn't know what the driver did, but the police officer had asked him to run to the next bus stop and come back. It was a punishment. I was aghast. There was no time for me to have reacted because it happened so quickly, and soon the traffic started moving. It was then that I realized the full import of what had happened. The police officer acted in error. He had no right. If that keke driver had committed a traffic crime, I don't know what he did, the law empowered the police officer to arrest him for onward prosecution, but not to punish him. So he acted in error. So if you come across a situation of that nature, you can call the PPRO in charge of the state and report the police officer. That's a kind of human rights intervention. Lawyers can also intervene. In fact, it happens every day. Someone is arrested and is taken to a police station for questioning. And members of the family or friends arrange for a lawyer to visit the police station to ensure that the accused person is treated in ways that are in accordance with the law. And that bail, for instance, is granted him free of charge if his offense is a bailable one. And that he is treated, he's not molested, he's not brutalized, he's not traumatized by speeches made by police officers which are unauthorized by the law. This is a kind of human rights intervention by a lawyer. Then, there are organizations that, if you are a well-meaning Nigerian and you understand why it's important that we do not condone human rights abuses, because an abuse condoned here will give birth to another, and that will give birth to another. We embolden criminals. We embolden rights violators who trample upon our rights if we slip over our rights. If we refuse to do what we should, then the man or woman who has violated someone's right today will do it again to someone else tomorrow, because after all, he had done it before and got away scot-free. And who knows, you might be the next person. You might be the next victim. So that is why we should not slip over our rights. We should do the right thing. Now, there are organizations such as the National Human Rights Commission, which you can report human rights abuses that you notice happening to your neighbor or to someone close to you, or that has happened to yourself. There are officers there that are paid by the federal government to address such issues. If the right abuse has to do with corruption in official positions or outside official positions, you can report to the ICPC, that is the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, a federal government agency. You report, and that organization is sworn to protect your identity so that nobody will victimize you for being a whistleblower. Then, if the abuse of rights has to do with money, then you can report to the EFCC, that's the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. It will investigate the matter and bring the offender to justice. Then, if your right has been abused and you are seeking redress, there is another federal government agency known as the Legal Aid Commission, the Nigerian Legal Aid Commission. Now, what does the Legal Aid Commission do? It is a group of lawyers under the employ of the federal government of Nigeria who intervene in case of rights abuse if the victim is indigent. That is, if the victim is so financially decrepit that he or she cannot engage a lawyer to represent him or her in a law court. If you report the matter to the Legal Aid Council, that council will provide you with a pro bono lawyer. That's a lawyer who will stand for you in a law court free of charge. That's what we mean by pro bono. If you Google Nigerian Legal Aid Council, you will see the address of that council in all the states of the Federation. And if this is not possible by you, there are individually owned human rights organizations that do it even better than the ones sponsored by the federal government. Because federal workers are public servants. Many of them are driven not by passion, but by self-interest, the income they earn. So very often, they may not be as dedicated as the staff of the individually owned human rights organizations. In Enugu here, I worked for several years with one of such human rights organizations, and the good thing is that all the staff of these organizations are volunteers. I was a volunteer, and as a volunteer, I functioned as a human rights reporter and intervention officer. A reporter is someone who goes around the country scouting for information on human rights abuse and submit this information to the organization for further action. An intervention officer is one who is sent to a place, a scene of human rights abuse, each time the organization receives a distress call. Yes, there is a hotline in these human rights organizations that members of the public can call if they are in distress related to human rights abuse. They can call the hotline, and then the organization usually sends one of the human rights intervention officers or more to the scene to arrest the situation, find out what is happening, report to the organization, and then further actions will be taken. I worked as an intervention officer for many years. And I'll give you two anecdotes, two of some of the experiences that I have. Here in Enugu, at a popular residential area called Independence Layout, there was a report one day in a building, a residential building that was not really occupied by many people except some young men, whom we later understood were Yahoo boys. A girl of university age was kidnapped and locked up in the room in that building, a single-story building. She was locked upstairs. And it happened that there's a secondary school neighboring to that building. And when the students were on break, they went outside the street to buy provisions for themselves. And the room in which that girl was locked had a window that overlooked the street. So the girl brought out her hand through the window, giving signs to the students, telling them that she was under captivity, that they should please inform the police. She couldn't speak loud enough because at that moment, the boys who kidnapped him were on the balcony of the building facing another street, smoking. They didn't know that the girl was already communicating with people in the outside world. So when the students reported to their school principal, the principal sent a couple of teachers to walk down the street and see whether what the girls reported was the truth. So the teachers did and still saw the girl there, imploring them to inform the police. So they went back to the school and started calling the police emergency number. The police received the number, received the call, asked questions, which were answered to the best of the knowledge of the people they asked. And the police said they were coming. But you can trust the Nigerian police when it comes to delaying. According to the story we heard, after the event had come to an end, the police came very late. This event started happening around 1 p.m. when the students were on break, and the police didn't arrive until 4 p.m. when most of the students had gone home. And they raided that building and found that the girl had been murdered with essential parts of her body taken away. And the boys had covered her remains, waiting for darkness so that they could go somewhere and dispose of it. Of course, they were arrested. They were arrested for further prosecution. By the time the Human Rights Office got to know about it, the matter was in the hands of the police, so there was nothing the organization could do. But rumor that we heard later said that the police eventually released those boys. Now, whether they were released for future trial or not is something I cannot tell. But the point I want to make here is this. That girl had been killed. Assume that the boys were actually prosecuted and imprisoned or sentenced to death. Nothing can resurrect the girl who was already dead. That is why human rights intervention, done promptly, with all the speed possible, is something to be desired and pursued. There was a second case almost in the same area, involving a widow working with a hotel very close to the same school I had mentioned. One day, as she was about to go home after completing her shift, a colleague, a man, told her that his friend who drove into the hotel to see him was about to drive out. She should allow him to give her a lift since he was driving her away. And the widow accepted. A week later, after this, the widow was reported missing. The police was informed, and the police started tracing her whereabouts from the hotel where she came to work, from where she left for her house and never returned home. Then the man, the staff of the hotel, who had arranged for her to be lifted, was arrested. Eventually, through police investigation, the body of the woman was found in a street drain, in a gutter, with some vital parts taken away. After the young man had been detained and interrogated by the police, he confessed that his friend, who was a ritualist, paid him ₦1 million to betray that woman into his hand. ₦1 million for a human life, just ₦1 million. This is instructive so that we can see how bad things have become in the country. The woman is a widow. Today her children are parentless. So that is why intervention is important. So While it is true that Human Rights Heralds, our channel, is not an intervention outfit, this channel is affiliated to a number of human rights organizations, especially the privately owned ones, which are more effective than the government-sponsored ones, because the people who staff these organizations are driven by self-interest. They are driven by the passion they have in protecting the rights of fellow citizens and their own. So many of them work without asking for payment. They are volunteers. So the passion with which they work can be compared to those who are paid by the government. So what should you do? If you have a problem related to human rights, call my number 0806 5422 624, 0806 5422 624, or 081 560 45350, 081 560 45350. If you call any of these numbers, I would direct you or link you to a human rights organization in your own state that can help solve the problem that you have. Understanding human rights intervention is not just for lawyers. It is for every citizen. When you know your rights, you can stand confidently, speak boldly, and demand justice. Thank you for watching this episode of Human Rights Heralds. If you found this helpful, please like, share, and subscribe so that more people can become empowered with knowledge. Together, we can build a society where rights are respected and protected. I remain your humble host, Ogochukwu Onoha, the Human Rights Wizard. Please leave a comment on the comment section if you like this video, and share this video so that other people can benefit from what we are doing here. See you again on our next video. Bye-bye.